Hi, welcome to Purple Bell Bottoms with that 70s gal cat. That's me. Have you ever wondered how many incredible stories disappear every single day? For quite a while now, I've worked at the front desk of an assisted living community. And at 65, I like to joke that I have 100 grandparents. Residents would roll up to my desk with their walkers and scooters, not because they needed anything, but because they needed somebody to talk to. And I'm so glad they did. They shared stories about first loves, about their families, surviving hardships, and the little moments that made life. Many of those conversations stayed with me long after I went home, and I even started writing some of them down. Today I'd like to share some of those stories with you. Most of the photographs you'll see are of the real residents whose lives touched mine. Every one of them is a reminder that every person you pass has a life worth remembering. The first person you have to meet is Earl. Earl drove a bright red mobility scooter like it was a sports car. I honestly think his life's mission was to make somebody laugh every single day. One afternoon I had just gotten off work and was sitting in my car when I noticed Earl coming across the parking lot on his scooter. He pulled right up beside my driver's window. I rolled it down, and with a straight face he looked at me and said, "I'd like to order a cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke." I laughed so hard. That was Earl. He never passed up an opportunity to brighten someone's day. Sometimes he'd stop by my desk just to sing me a song.
All I can say, beer makes me a jolly good guy. Champagne costs too much money. Beer whiskey is too rough. And beer makes me a good jolly guy.
Other days he'd excitedly tell me about a baseball game, as though he'd just witnessed history.
Then when Tampa got up and hit that home run, that gave us 5-4. We beat them. And was that beautiful when they hit that home run? I really enjoyed that.
People like Earl remind us that joy doesn't come from having a perfect life. Sometimes it simply comes from trying to make someone else's day a little brighter. And then there were stories that stayed with me the longest. The ones that showed me what lifelong love really looks like. There's an older man, Carl, who lives at the assisted living community. He takes the bus to visit his wife at a nursing home for people with Alzheimer's. Every time Carl comes back from his visits, he'll tell me about how it went. Sometimes they're able to talk, and sometimes he'll just lay with her in bed and cuddle. One day, Carl returned from their visit, and he told me that she was complaining to the nurses that she never gets any mail. So Carl went to his room and came back with a bundle of mail that his wife had saved when he wrote to her while in the service overseas in Korea. He said that back then her mother didn't want her talking to him because she was Italian and he was Irish, and of course was adamantly against any mingling with the Irish. But Carl wrote letters anyway and sent them to the Red Cross where she worked. He wasn't going to let anyone stop him. They got married 6 months later when he came back from the war. So I made copies of those old letters for Carl because he decided he was going to send his wife 1 letter per week. Love letters from the man who still loves her with his whole heart. After Carl told me that story, I just sat there for a minute. In a world where so much feels temporary, Here was a man still writing love letters to his bride after all those decades. Some love stories never really end. Of course, there were plenty of moments that simply made me smile. The friendships, the surprises, the personalities you never forget. Rita and Jerry were two of my favorite residents. Most days they'd stop by my desk separately to chat. One morning, though, they came together with huge smiles on their faces, like they were up to something. Rita slid something across the counter toward me, and the two of them just stood there giggling. It was a can of Coca-Cola that said Bestie on the label. It was such a simple little gift, but it was one of those sweet moments that made my whole day. Rita loved talking about her children and grandchildren. Family was everything to her. Jerry, on the other hand, loved talking politics. She'd tell me stories about volunteering on political campaigns over the years, especially campaigning for Jeb Bush. Now, you know how sometimes people tell you stories and you quietly wonder, is that really true? Or is it just getting a little better every time they tell it? Well, Jerry proved every bit of it. One day she came to the desk all dressed up and ready to go out. A limousine pulled up out front. A young man stepped out carrying a bouquet of flowers, and he escorted Jerry off to a political rally like she was the guest of honor. The next morning she rolled right back into the lobby, absolutely beaming, with a Jeb Bush campaign sign proudly attached to the front of her walker. I couldn't help but laugh. Most people retire from campaigning. Jerry just found a new set of wheels. One thing I noticed when working there, many of the residents talked about people. The people they loved, the people they missed, the people who helped shape their lives. And that brings me to Sophie. So I had to write something about Sophie. Sophie will be 95 next week. You can't tell by looking at her because she seems so quiet and introverted. But she loves to tell animated stories of growing up in Yugoslavia, remembering every detail as if it were yesterday. She began working at 14, sewing uniforms for soldiers in the army. She also remembers getting the knock on her door during the war, telling the family to leave, and taking with them only what they could carry. They lost everything. Sophie is only about 5 feet tall, and with her German accent, she's as cute as a button. She came out one day and did a little dance and said, "Dancing with the Stars has nothing on her." She used to be a great dancer, and she and her husband were known to dance together to their favorite song, Edelweiss. When Sophie celebrated her 95th birthday, I couldn't help but record a little piece of it, because moments like these deserve to be remembered. Happy birthday to you!
I wish you happy birthday. Would you like a piece of cake?
Make sure you have everything.
Huh?
Yeah, you can have some cake.
You know what?
You can have some cake.
I'll be here. I won't talk you into anything.
What did you get for your birthday?
Oh, so many things. I don't even know what they all are. This is one of them.
Oh, that's cute.
Like many of the residents, Sophie loved playing bingo. It wasn't just about winning a prize. It was about sharing laughs and enjoying the people around her. Which reminds me of Marion. One afternoon, the bingo room was full, and everyone was concentrating on their cards, when Marion suddenly said she wasn't feeling well. Within seconds, she began to lose consciousness. We rushed over to help her while someone called 911. It wasn't long before the fire truck and ambulance pulled up outside. As usual, a whole team of firefighters and EMTs came hurrying through the front doors, carrying their equipment. By then, Marion had completely passed out, and they quickly went to work. After checking her over, they carefully lifted her onto the gurney. And then, just as they were getting ready to wheel her out, Marion opened her eyes. She looked around and saw 6 fit, handsome young firefighters and EMTs all leaning over her. She blinked for a second, looked at each one of them, and with perfect timing asked, "Have I died and gone to heaven?" The whole room burst into laughter. Thankfully, Marion recovered just fine, but I have a feeling those firefighters are still telling that story to this day. One of the things I absolutely loved about working in the assisted living community was seeing how many people volunteered their time to come help brighten the residents' day. And the volunteers weren't always people. Some of our sweetest visitors had 4 legs. One of my favorites was Scruffy. Scruffy was a rescue dog who never showed up underdressed. He always wore something fancy around his neck. In this picture with Max, Scruffy is wearing a colorful jester collar. Max adored Scruffy so much that he kept this very picture hanging on the wall in his room. That little dog brought him so much happiness. Then there was Truman. Truman was a retired greyhound from a kennel club racetrack. He was enormous. You couldn't have asked for a gentler dog. Here he is visiting with his owner, Nate. The residents absolutely loved him, and Truman seemed to love every minute of being loved on. And then there was Ava. Every time she came to the front door, she'd walk right up to my desk, put both paws on the counter as if to say, "Hi, where do I check in today?" She was a beautifully trained therapy Labrador with the sweetest personality. One Easter, we even had a giant Great Dane come for a visit, wearing bunny ears. Now, if you've never seen a Great Dane dressed like the Easter Bunny, you're missing out. He looked like he should have been intimidating, but he was actually shy enough that the bunny ears fit his personality perfectly. As if that wasn't enough, we also had a small farm just down the road that raised miniature therapy horses. Every so often, Sue would walk them over to visit our residents. She even had tiny custom-made shoes for them so that they could safely walk through the building. The horses would quietly make their way from person to person, gently nudging residents with their noses, patiently waiting for a scratch or a hug. You should have seen the smiles on everyone's faces. One day, a woman came to visit with reptiles. She brought an alligator, with its mouth safely taped shut, of course, and an enormous yellow boa constrictor. I have to admit, I expected half the ladies to roll away in their wheelchairs screaming. Instead, they couldn't wait to pet them. They were absolutely fascinated. Sometimes I would take Sally, this adorable little pug, for a walk. She belonged to one of our residents who was blind and confined to a wheelchair. Even though she couldn't see Sally, she'd hold her in her lap for hours, gently hugging her while Sally quietly snuggled against her. It reminded me how powerfully simple affection can be. Sometimes a warm little body curled up in your lap can brighten an entire day. There were even days when I had my own little office assistants. One morning, Doodle's 96-year-old owner had to go to the hospital, so Doodle became my desk buddy for the day. And this sweet little white poodle practically helped me greet everyone who walked through the front door. Working there taught me something that I'll never forget. Watching those visits reminded me that affection doesn't always require words. Sometimes a wagging tail or a gentle nudge says everything that needs to be said. And speaking of love, David shared one of my favorite stories. David and his wife lived at the facility. His wife was a quiet woman and was confined to a wheelchair. David, on the other hand, was very outgoing and social. He was always telling jokes. But one day he got serious and told me the story of how he met his wife. He said, she was working at the girls' summer camp and I was working at the boys' camp across the street, making 25 cents an hour. She noticed me one day and thought I was just a worker. Then we had a camp meeting and they announced me as the one who ran the lake, and she about fell off her chair. We've been married for 60 years now. 60 years later, he was still taking care of the woman who first caught his eye across that summer camp. That's the kind of love our generation grew up believing in. One of the most touching things I witnessed happened in memory care. Even when Alzheimer's had taken away so many memories, it often couldn't take away the instinct to nurture. Watch what happened when one of our ladies held one of our lifelike baby dolls.
Come on, slowly. Look up.
Joycey.
Look up there.
Hi, baby.
Hi, baby. Hi, baby. Hi, darling. Hi, precious.
Okay, now you can look up at
It reminded me that love runs much deeper than memory. Love has a way of leaving its mark on us. Sometimes it's shown in the quiet instinct to take care of someone. Other times it's found in the words we carry with us for the rest of our lives. So now I want to tell you about Jack. Jack is from Massachusetts and has that accent that I miss. He said he had to show me something. He said, my wife Selena used to love this musical bear when she was in the hospital with cancer 9 years ago. It made her so happy. She didn't want to live with all those tubes and medication, so they took her off all the machines. I was with her when she died at 4 o'clock in the morning. I used to get so mad at the doctors, but then my wife always told me, do the kind thing. I always remember that. Jack's words stayed with me. Do the kind thing. Sometimes kindness isn't something dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as noticing someone and starting a conversation, or introducing two people that might become friends. That's what happened with Lorraine. Lorraine was an introvert, much like me. She rarely participated in the activities around the assisted living, but she had the biggest porch in the whole facility, and it was overflowing with beautiful orchids. Since I'm a plant lover myself, I'd stop by her porch just to admire them. We'd spend time talking about orchids, gardening, and every once in a while I'd surprise her by bringing a new plant to add to her collection. One day I noticed another resident named Richard. He mostly kept to himself and didn't say much, so I stopped by to chat with him for a while. I asked him if he liked plants. His face lit up. He told me he had grown up on a farm and had spent much of his life working with plants. I smiled and said, come on, I want to introduce you to someone. We walked over to Lorraine's porch, and before long she was proudly showing Richard all of her orchids. It didn't take long before they discovered they had plenty to talk about. After that first meeting, Richard became a regular visitor on Lorraine's porch. The two of them would sit together talking about plants, gardening, and life. Watching that friendship grow reminded me that sometimes changing one's life doesn't require a grand gesture. Sometimes all it takes is introducing two lonely people who have something in common. And in a place where companionship means so much, that simple introduction blossomed into a beautiful friendship. Before I finish, I have to tell you about a couple of our veterans. Many of our military residents naturally found each other. They'd sit together swapping stories, talking about their time in the service, sharing memories, and reminiscing about the good old days. It was obvious they shared a special bond, the kind that only fellow veterans could truly understand. One of them was Max. Max had proudly served in the Army, and you rarely saw him without one of his military hats. He wore them with pride, and they were quite a reminder of a chapter in his life that meant so much to him. Then there was Arthur. Arthur had also served in the Army, but before moving into the assisted living, he had spent many years driving semi-trucks. He also volunteered with the Catholic Charities, always looking for ways to help others. Arthur loved riding his mobility scooter, almost as much as he used to love riding motorcycles. He had turned that scooter into his own little parade vehicle. There was usually an American flag flying from a pole in the back, or an American flag blanket draped across his lap. And every Sunday he would make the long trip on his scooter all the way to the Catholic church, several miles away. I used to worry that his battery wouldn't last that trip. He'd just grin and say, "Don't worry, I know all the shortcuts through the neighborhoods." And somehow he always made it. Spending time with veterans like Max and Arthur reminded me that, although the uniforms may be put away, the pride, the determination, and the spirit of service never really leave them. As I look back on all these people, I realize they gave me something far more valuable than stories. They gave me perspective. Our generation grew up with grandparents telling us stories on porches, around kitchen tables, or while sitting on the porch after supper. Today, we're often moving so fast that we don't stop long enough to hear someone's life story. But every wrinkle, every gray hair, every photograph, every faded love letter represents a life that was just as busy and hopeful as ours. There's something deeply healing about spending time with people who have loved so deeply for so long. They remind us that life isn't measured by how many years we have, the kindness we've shown, and the stories we've left behind. It's measured by the people we've loved. So if you still have an older parent, a grandparent, an elderly neighbor, or someone sitting quietly in an assisted living community, take a little extra time. Ask them about their life. You may walk away with a story you'll never forget. And someday, someone may treasure yours. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.